name's Drew, and we have three guests with us tonight. First off, we have Alex Odd, who is a stay-at-home mother of four, right, Alex?
Yep.
Yeah. She's former high school English teacher. She has her own podcast, correct?
I do.
Yes, Making Room for God.
Yeah.
She's on the board, I think, of a local nonprofit.
That's right. We love White County. Mm-hmm.
It's true. So Alex is basically a celebrity in our town and community. Yeah, I knew you'd get a little embarrassed when I said that. But most importantly, Alex is a volunteer for our student ministry at FC3 Students, and that is how I've come to know her. So that's Alex Odd, our first person we're interviewing. Second, we have Matt Shelton. Matt is a youth pastor at FCC Noble, or youth and worship, I should say, right? Yep, you do it all. That's what I've been told. You have two daughters?
Daughter and a son.
Daughter and a son. I was close. Apparently, I'm not as good a friend with Matt as I should be.
It's fine. We'll go get lost in the woods again and reconnect that way.
That's right. Matt and I do the wilderness week at Will Belton. So we run around the woods for a week. And then our last guest is Storm Williams. Storm is my nephew. I knew Storm when he was a young punk brat of a kid. And now I'm proud to say that he's a man of God that I respect and have a lot of respect for him. He's just recently moved, right, from Florida to Tennessee. Yep. So you transitioned from working at Teen Challenge to now doing some contracting stuff?
Yep. Big
Right.
transition.
Big transition, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Closer to the family. That's always good. All right. So we have five questions that I really want us to discuss tonight. And I don't care how you answer. So whoever wants to go first can just jump in. But our first question is just briefly, how has COVID-19 affected your life? What's changed in your home and your work? Like how has it been affected by this?
No toilet paper for one.
That's right.
Seriously. Our church blessed us so we wouldn't have toilet paper right now. But I think just on a bigger side, I've been working still, so that hasn't been affected. I think one of the biggest things would be we just moved up here maybe 2 weeks before everything shut down. And so, I don't know, in such a time where we kind of need some serious support, we need serious community. I think just like the isolation has really, it's really negatively affected us, and it's really caused us, I don't know, just some hardship, really. That's been the most difficult part, is just being truly alone, whereas a month ago I was surrounded by community. So that's definitely affected us a lot.
Yeah.
I think for me, it's been seeing work transition a lot. So instead of so much the seeing people on a regular basis, all of a sudden it's like we have to figure out how to do everything online. How do we do church services well? How do we interact with our kids well? And just that transition has been kind of weird, but good. And really at home, more the weirdness is my wife being home all the time, and she's more of the stir crazy one of, I would love to be stuck at home for weeks at a time, but she's one who's like, I need to get out and do something. If I'm stuck in this house with my children for too many days in a row, I'm going to lose my mind. So otherwise, it's really just been change, but not necessarily negative change.
Well, I'm definitely with your wife. I need to get out and talk to people. So going a little bonkers at home with the kids, but my wife's more okay with it.
Well, that's where I'm at. I'm home with all the kids, and I am thankful, but I like to be around people. Like Zoom calls are great and we're getting good at them. All of us are, but I like to be with people that I can touch and see, face to face. So that's really been, my life, I told Drew before we started, has probably been impacted the least because I'm a stay-at-home mom. But having all 4 kids here all day and being not just the mom, but the teacher, that's been a challenge for me, certainly. And then not having my biblical community, not meeting with them on a very regular basis, that has been a hardship too. I get envious of my husband because he is essential and he gets to leave.
Yeah. Kevin Queen said this. He said, the greatest gift that a leader gives in a crisis situation is a non-anxious presence. So my question to the 3 of you, which I would consider all 3 of you leaders in different ways, is how do you lead with a non-anxious spirit? Because I think for a lot of us during all this time, the temptation is to be anxious. Whether it's we're afraid we're going to get the virus, or we're just anxious because we're trapped in our homes and we're don't know what school's going to look like in the future or next semester, or if we're going to continue to work. It's like there's a lot of anxiety that creeps in. So how are you leading and not having an anxious spirit?
Well, for me, go ahead, Matt. You go.
No, you're fine. Go for it.
I was just going to say, for me, it's a daily battle. Like it's a daily battle. It's every day waking up and choosing surrender over control. And my flesh and sin tendency is to want to control things. And it's really difficult to surrender that. Whether it be controlling the germs that are entering my home, or controlling the behaviors of the people that I live with, or even, just controlling the amount of news that we consume, and the fears that come along with it, all sorts of things. I want to control those things, but the Lord has not given me that control, and it's actually best for me to surrender those things. And then when I'm able to surrender and repent of that desire to control, that's when I have the non-anxious spirit. But it's really hard to wake up each day, and it's a battle throughout the day to choose the spirit over my flesh, because it's really tempting to just want to control for me.
Yeah, that's a struggle. We feel like, hey, if I can be in control of this, I can somehow keep myself from getting this or whatever. And it's just not how it works.
Right.
Yeah. Matt, what were you going to say?
Yeah. So for me, a lot of it has been just having the servant mindset has kept any kind of anxiety at bay. Like our church is a distribution location for school meals. So every day families come through to pick up a meal from the school, and just being able to contact people in our church to just confirm, hey, how are you guys doing? Is there anything that we can get for you yet? Like, are you guys financially stable? Are you working? How has this affected your jobs? And I mean, there hasn't been a lot to even worry about on that side, but just to be able to be more focused on what others need, then I feel like there hasn't really been time to think about, oh no, how is this going to get to us? Granted, we've been so blessed to be in this weird little bubble that no one's really come down with anything. So we're probably in this weird position of not seeing it be as real as it actually is. But like, we have an exchange student right now, and her, like, from Italy, and her family is all safe, but still just to pour that comfort into her to say, hey, where we're here right now, like, we have so much freedom. We aren't in a big population. Your parents are safe. We can go outside for a walk. Like, just to be able to find needs and to speak into those needs, comfort, I feel like is comforting in itself.
Yeah. I think that's really interesting what each of you said separately. Alex said, okay, I've got to let go of the control, because when I try to be in control, I'm putting myself first. And then Matt said, the way I'm handling this is to serve others. And so it's like, hey, I'm not putting myself first, and I'm going to focus on other people. That's how I stay anxious free, or not having anxiety about this. Storm, what would you add to that?
Yeah, I would say as far as a leadership thing goes, there's a big difference between like ministry and a secular job, and there's a big difference in the environment and the words that people speak. And so we all know that the news is not helping us be at peace at all. And so with like the men that I'm around, constantly just going back and forth about what's going on in our world, it really has given me an opportunity to point them to God and to point them to, him being in control. Whereas I feel like, if I wouldn't have those opportunities if there wasn't chaos going on. So just really using moments where people are anxious, people are afraid of the future, and just like turning their attention to the Lord, saying, hey, but God is sovereign, God is in control, and he knows what this is going to turn out to be like. And I believe that has impacted people, just pointing people back to the Lord.
Yeah, for sure. So what has been an unexpected blessing or joy or something that is good that you've seen come out of all of this?
In 2017, my friend Megan and I, we wrote down our biggest dreams that we have, like the biggest, craziest dreams in the whole wide world. And number one on the dream list was a long season that would be uninterrupted to sow into our families, like no agenda. And so I feel a little bit like the Lord, even in an upside down kind of way, has blessed me. And even though it's some days my greatest trial to be at home with everybody all day long, and the noise in my home is loud, and sometimes I get frustrated because I feel like I can't hear from the Lord in the ways I used to when kids were at school. I also realized that the Lord is lavishing me with such a gift to be the one who gets to steward my children all day long, and to be the one who gets to do their math homework with them and pray with them in between school lessons, and we don't have to rush off and leave, and that Daddy doesn't have meetings every night. It feels like a gift in an upside down way.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. The virus is your fault because you prayed for this, right? That's what everybody else
is sovereign.
Right? But man, that's true. Being at home has definitely had challenges, right? Because all of our families are there, and probably even more so than normal, we tend to get more agitated with each other and maybe a little snippy. But the plus side of that is like, man, I oftentimes feel like a bad dad because I'm not there enough for my kids. It's like, man, I've had time to do all the things that were on my list to do with my kids.
Yeah.
We're planning on going camping in the next week or two because that's very social distancing. And sometimes I just don't have time for that margin in my life. But it's like now we have time for that. And that has definitely been a blessing that we've been intentional with. And one way we've done that is we watched this Skit Guys, bedtime Bible story with the Skit Guys every night. And my son loves it. And so, but here we are studying God's word together as a 2-year-old, a 4-year-old, a 14-year-old, and then Emily and I. And it's like, man, normally we're not all home every night together, but now we have the ability to make those things happen. So definitely a blessing there.
And we should mention too that the four of us, we're blessed because I know, Storm, you're married, and we're all at home with someone. So I say that even like recognizing the privilege of that. I know that so many people don't have that, and that their isolation isn't a gift in the same way. But I trust too that the Lord in each of our own refiner's fire has something good for us.
Matt, how would you
Yeah.
answer that question?
I mean, I would echo everything that's been said. I love that we get to slow down because I feel like I get to see my family so much more. And beyond that, like, I'm thankful that my wife gets to work, but I'm also thankful for this time where, like, she gets to raise our kids. I mean, I wish I were there as well all the time, but just that she gets to pour into them what they're learning and what they're growing in. I mean, we have a great babysitter, but it just, that specialness of my wife gets to be the one to pour into them, and that I have more time to also be there with them. Selfishly, I really like that I have more time that I get to go run and be active. And really what I'm most excited about is that this is forcing us as a church to do new things. Like our first service that we put online, like a former student of mine contacts me afterwards and is like, hey, so I've been wandering for years, just gotten into some really sketchy stuff, but I want to be baptized. And so we were able to baptize him that afternoon of, all right, so this is forcing us to do some things that we have talked about for a long time, but never put into action. And God is blessing that. So,
Matt, let me ask you a question. Since we both have the same profession here, do you feel like you're working more or less now? Maybe speak to that a little.
Working differently. I feel like I have age groups that I do not get to see at all. So my interaction with the elementary group, like they are, I mean, all of that is in the hands of the parents. A lot of my junior high kids are hard to get a hold of and aren't necessarily members of our church. So some of them are just like an enigma. But for my high schoolers who are choosing to go the distance and like be involved in our online stuff, like I think this has been still good for them. I think that I see and interact with my students a lot less, but my job has turned a lot more into let's make this machine run. The worship side has taken a lot more of my energy of let's make sure that we're putting out some kind of quality project or product so that when people come to worship online on Sunday, that it's a legitimate worship experience and not a, oh, we feel obligated to turn our church's service on, but it's really cringy.
Yeah. I'm not sure. I don't know if I feel like I'm working more or I'm just not great with technology. And so I spend a lot of time doing things that other people could do in a short amount of time.
Yes.
It's like, man, the learning curve has been steep for me. It's like I'm spending a lot of time trying to I finally got Braden to help me the other night. Like we have our YouTube page and I was trying to make the banner cover. I was like, I can't do this. Like I can't get the graphic to fit in there proportionally and not look messed up. And finally I was like, Braden, if you do this, I'll buy your dinner tomorrow, which is a great joke because as my son, I always pay for his dinner. But he did it. And so I bought him Taco Bell, ironically. Because
I've learned how to use Instagram. So that's.
I forget you are my not social media friend.
Correct.
That's right. Storm, what about you?
I think two big things. First would be I've been forced to rest, like especially on the weekends before like all this happened. I would set my mind to rest, and I would just say, "Well, I want to go do this," and then next thing you know, the weekend's over and I hadn't rested at all. And I felt like, I don't know, this has really forced me into a corner of just like doing nothing, staying at home, which is something that I needed to like just reflect and, ask myself some questions and get some answers. Also, my marriage, I feel like, has really just grown because me and Becca have had a lot of time together, So that's been really good, just deepening our friendship and getting to hang out more.
Yeah. I would say I don't know, it's been a few years now, Emily and I decided to practice Sabbath on a regular basis. And I know there are a lot of different people's thoughts and opinions on that, but what Sabbath looks like for us is we rest on Saturdays. And we do make exceptions, obviously, when I have youth trips. Matt and I were both, I believe, was probably a month ago now. And so obviously we didn't rest on that Saturday. We were there jumping around with middle school kids that somehow all smelled like feet afterward. But this practice of Sabbath, like, God's not crazy. And man, it makes a difference in your life. You're just like, hey, I'm going to slow down today and I'm going to spend time with you, but I'm just going to rest. Like, I'm going to nap. I'm going to read. I'm going to do things that I don't normally do as a regular part of my work week. And I would agree, in this season, like, we're resting even more than we normally would. Our Sabbaths are even lazier than what they would have been before because there's nothing to do. Yeah.
Absolutely. It's been good.
One last question. How do you keep yourself and maybe even your family encouraged during the midst of this global pandemic and not even like about the virus, but just the constant in the news that frequently seems to be bad news, or at least high anxiety and stressful information that keeps getting poured out upon us?
Well, praise God that we are a people who believe in his sovereignty, not just on a worldwide spectrum. Like, we know that he is bigger than this pandemic, and the world has seen and endured pandemics before that are bigger even than this. We put our faith in a God who is steadfast and loving, even in the brokenness of the world. So that right there, we say we believe those things as Christians, but this is a time for us to really ask the Lord to teach us that. Do we really believe it? And do we really put our trust in you? And I feel like he's teaching me in that, but also he's sovereign over my life, even like the little daily things. He made us for a time such as this. He knew at the beginning of the world that we would live through this time, and he's gifted us certain things and certain abilities and ways to love our neighbor for this very moment, and even this time to sow into our own families. He knew it was coming for us, and that gives me such hope. And it's not always easy, but it gives me the hope to persevere, that I can have joy in this trial, that the testing of my faith is going to result in such a perseverance that will mark my life and the generations after me. That maybe my children's lives are being shaped in this moment, and that is enough for us. That's enough, that God is writing the story and we're not left to chance or to circumstance, but this is a part of his grander plan to work out our salvation and all things for our good. And I just can't, even though some days it's hard for me to remember that, I can't imagine what my life would be like if I didn't have that anchor. And sometimes it feels like I don't, but when I can rest in it, I'm just overcome with gratitude, and it makes me want to give it away to my neighbor.
Yeah. Matt, what about you?
I feel like we do a lot of redirecting. I mean, we don't have a lot of the news coming at us. Just we don't have a lot of access to that aside from whatever pops up on Facebook. But like, whenever our exchange student expresses concern of, are we going to go back to school? Like, we try to look at the blessings in all of it of, hey, like, you still get to be here, because she doesn't necessarily want to go home yet. Like, hey, your family's still safe. Hey, we have all of this freedom that we can still go out to some extent. Alania my daughter has gotten into this phase of saying there are monsters everywhere. And so instead of necessarily saying like monsters aren't real, that instead we say, hey, but Jesus is bigger than the monster. And so she's sometimes when Titus, our son, gets a little upset or something, then she started to pick up to just be able to tell him, Titus, Jesus is bigger, or you don't have to be afraid because we have Jesus. And so just to be able to shape her mindset of whatever comes at us, like Jesus is bigger. I mean, that doesn't necessarily mean that that the big scary monster or whatever isn't real or that it won't come at us, but that like we don't necessarily have to be fearful when we're confronted with it.
Yeah.
So I think that just redirection of, hey, we can still have joy even in the midst of chaos has been really, really beneficial for us.
That reminds me of the memes that I see all over Facebook that are something to the effect of like, you know, you tell me how big your storm is and I'll tell you how big my God is. And sometimes I laugh and, you know, keep scrolling on those for sure. But there is truth in that though, right? Like right now in America, it seems like nothing is bigger than this pandemic that we're all in. But the reality is our God is way bigger than this. And he is sovereign. Alex said is totally going to see us through this.
And it's exciting to me. Sorry. Kind of what Storm mentioned earlier, like you just look at the church throughout all of history, throughout the world of like in times of trial is when the church explodes the most, that people look for answers, that people look for hope. And I mean, this is an awesome time that if we are diligent with our opportunities, then big things can happen in the church. I guess my one fear is that we're going to be just as fearful or just as hesitant to do anything, that this time may pass and that things will move on and we'll go back to our normal, and we've missed prime opportunity to see the gospel spread.
Alex, did you want to say something there? No? Okay, sorry. I misread your facial expressions. I agree, Matt. I think it's important that as leaders, but just as followers of Christ, that we lead people around us in saying, hey, we trust God. Like, and that means something. It's not just I go to church and trust God and that's what I've always done. Like, you know, my faith is in God. He is sovereign. He is in control. And no matter what happens in this, I'm going to be okay because my faith is in him. And I think we have to have that attitude. That way, when the people that are really nervous or upset or anxious with that, when they see that, then it'll be contagious. Like, man, I want to know about this relationship with this God that is so life-changing. He can be calm in the storm. Now, do you want to say something else?
I think like just a combination of all the answers, there's purpose in all of this. Like God has a purpose, and that should bring peace to everyone. Is that like even in the unseen, like we don't necessarily see the big purpose of all this happening and everything, but as history repeats itself time and time again, you know, after a big tragedy, after a big struggle, it's usually when people turn to God the most. Because I was a drug addict. I didn't realize I needed God till I was broken. And people don't realize how much they need God when everything is going great. But whenever they experience struggle, he's the one that they look to. And so I think that that's something that I just find peace in, is that, hey, God is doing something right now. And it might be hard, but, we can endure hardship on this side of heaven because it's preparing us for glory anyways. So that's kind of what gives me peace, that, hey, God is up to something.
I'm gonna write that down, Storm. That I'm gonna pray specifically that this struggle that our country is in, that it's gonna bring life change from it. Like that God is going to have a harvest after this because people are going to turn to Him, and I think that should just be all of our prayers, honestly. Hey, that was our last question. Thanks for spending your time on here. If you're watching this, I hope this was beneficial to you. You could probably go follow all these people on social media or something. I don't know. We're not really famous. We're just average Joes. But thanks for watching. I hope it was beneficial. Be sure to subscribe to my YouTube channel. See you guys next week.